Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro, friends. Today's episode of the podcast is brought to you by Elixir of Specialty Coffee. Looks like whiskey, feels like tea, made from coffee, and unlike anything you've tasted before, Elixir is shipping free across the US before Thanksgiving. So get your orders in now. There's a link in the show notes below. Click on that, get your code. We'll use the code Thank you 2019, and you will get free shipping on all your Elixir trios shipped before Thanksgiving. Today on the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, I heard a phrase today that helped me tie my thoughts together for after the conversation I had yesterday on the podcast. The phrase is, you can't put lipstick on a pig. And I heard that phrase off a podcast that I listened to, a marketing podcast that is released by Neil Patel. And they were talking about WeWork and the demise of WeWork and the absolute debauchery and debacle that came from the situation that is WeWork. And it left me pondering the crisis that we are currently experiencing in the coffee industry and what's getting in the way of real solutions and the veils that are stopping us from understanding what's really going on. A lot of those veils are self-erected. We put those veils in front of us because it's just too hard to understand what's going on with what's called the coffee price crisis. But a lot of those veils are being put up by people who want you to think that they are great operators in the space that is the coffee industry, but they're not. And I'm somebody who's guilty of not wanting to take a peek behind some of those veils. I'm not someone you'd say like shies away from seeing the truth, but there are some times when I just want to believe that when people telling me that they're doing the right thing, I want to believe that they're doing the right thing. And the antidote for that is challenging what people are saying. And I have been guilty of believing people's bullshit sometimes. I've been guilty of assuming that people who are quite influential operators in the global coffee sphere, I've been guilty of believing at face value an initial conversation that they've been having. So they'll tell me, oh yeah, we're really trying to do the right thing, and here's what we mean by that. But then when you scratch a little further and you decide, well, let me figure out if what you're telling me is true, you come to see that once you take a peek behind that veil, things may not be quite as you anticipated. But you have to be willing to take a peek behind the veil in order to see if people are telling the truth or there's a bunch of fuckery involved. And I had an interesting conversation on the podcast yesterday where I'm not sure that I walked away from the conversation feeling the same way about the organization as I did when we started the conversation. There are definitely some trust issues that I now have after having spoken with a representative from World Coffee Research yesterday. And no doubt this is going to cause some blowback for me. No doubt I'm going to get a phone call from somebody or an email from someone saying, why are you talking like this about World Coffee Research? We're here to do amazing things and blah, blah, blah. But I invite you to have a listen to the conversation I had yesterday and tell me if you're not left wondering what the fuck was actually going on there. Because I'm not sure that we both had the same intention coming into that conversation. And look, the preface of the discussion was that I had put out an email through the newsletter, and that was attached to a blog post that was about securing the supply chain. And Greg had told me that he really wants to weigh in on the discussion. And, we jumped on a call and I realized that we disagreed. We had different perspectives on this, and that's awesome. Like, when people don't have the same perspective on something or disagree on something, it presents an opportunity for me to learn. And is there something I'm missing? Is there something that I could open my mind up to that will give me a perspective different to my own and give me some information that perhaps could bring me more information? I'll have more pieces about this subject that I'm trying to learn as much as I can about, which is the crisis that coffee is experiencing. And so rather than have a full-blown conversation with him ahead of time, I felt that it would be much better for us and it would serve our community better for both of us if we have that conversation in front of everybody. And so I didn't understand the depths of how different our perspectives were, and that's fine. Again, not having the same perspectives is awesome. But I felt that there were a couple of veils there that I wasn't aware of. And I've had Greg on the podcast before, and he's an interesting human to have a conversation with because he comes from a different sector than coffee, and he is the director of partnerships for World Coffee Research. So Greg's job is to build partners for World Coffee Research that bring in money for World Coffee Research. But very quickly into the conversation, I came to realize that there was perhaps a different agenda that I was not realizing was going on with World Coffee Research. World Coffee Research is supposed to be an organization, from my understanding, are building a gene bank for the coffee industry and helping through what they're doing with regards to the scientific work that they're doing, helping to build an understanding of where the best varietals will grow based on origin and terroir and all of those kinds of things. And they can only do that through funding. But when I have people on my podcast, it's with the intention of expanding the discussion. And I felt, and I am getting a feeling that I'm not sure that World Coffee Research, and this is me going out on a massive limb here, I'm now left questioning the intentions of what World Coffee Research is about. And if anyone from World Coffee Research listens to this and would like to help me set that straight, come on the podcast and do it, because I definitely got the impression from the conversation that I had yesterday, that when Greg was pushing the agenda that Dunkin' Donuts is a contributor of theirs, and he was pushing back up against my challenge to him of, well, if Dunkin' Donuts can contribute a half a penny per pound to World Coffee Research, why can't they give that to the producer? His response was, I'm not sure that would really change anything for the producer. It suggests to me that there's a disconnect between what World Coffee Research, what their agenda is, and what the problem is that we're experiencing as a global community. And so I have to, by looking behind the veil and challenging that, I've had to reassess what my opinion is of what they're trying to do. And I may have had the wrong opinion in the first place. The reason I say this is because as much as I wanted to kind of convince myself that World Coffee Research is here to do an amazing thing for our industry, they're a money-making enterprise. Their agenda is to, whether they'll openly admit it or not, their agenda is to stay funded. And it's capitalistic. Even if they're set up as whatever kind of a foundation they're set up as, or a corporation, or I believe that they're a non-profit. But whatever the agenda is, they need money to survive. And so by me wanting to believe the Kool-Aid that I was being fed, I looked at them in an incorrect way. And I'm not suggesting that I'm now looking at them in a correct way, but by looking behind the veils that are put up in this industry to convince us of a bunch of shit, we can get a little bit closer to understanding how we can fix the fuckery that we're a part of. He was trying to convince me yesterday that specialty coffee isn't the answer and relationship buying isn't the answer. Securing the supply chain isn't the answer to fixing the coffee price crisis. Now, he's not wrong in the sense that there is no one thing that's going to fix the coffee price crisis. But to suggest that doing that plus contributing to World Coffee Research is what's going to fix the coffee price crisis is incorrect. There is such deep-seated, complex, generational issues that stem from things that we created on this side of the supply chain, on the front end of the supply chain, and they're all rooted in colonialism. And it is absolutely our job to be an active participant in solution fixing immediately. And some of the suggestions of what I think were made in that discussion reek of further colonialism and privilege. And I think we can do better as an industry. And so if you listen to that conversation and you are looking at considering contributing to World Coffee Research, I would not tell you not to do that. I think that we need to understand more of the science behind the varietals and where they should be planted in order to increase the yields so that farmers have better access, or so that farmers have a better chance to survive. I absolutely believe that we should be doing that. But that's a long-term strategy that I'm not 100% convinced of what happens to those funds when they end up with World Coffee Research. I don't want anyone to think that because I've had World Coffee Research on the podcast twice that I'm advocating for whatever it is that they stand for. And the number one value of this podcast, whether it be as a part of the Daily Coffee Pro or as a part of the Map It Forward long format conversations, the number one value that we hold ourselves to and at a very high standard is integrity. And so I just felt weird today about the idea that perhaps by having World Coffee Research on the podcast, people would come to assume that I'm advocating for World Coffee Research. And I'm not. I'm simply inviting them to the table to have an open discussion that allows all of us to look behind the veil of what they're doing. And after taking a peek, if I had a cool $100,000 that I needed to invest somewhere, it wouldn't be with World Coffee Research. And that's a very personal perspective. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm just saying that if you are considering doing that, I would listen to the discussion first and make up your own mind. But I don't want people to think that I'm advocating for them based on yesterday's conversation. We butted heads a lot, and it left me concerned for a bunch of reasons, that people may feel that I'm suggesting that they are somebody that is perhaps, look, I'm choosing my words very carefully because this could potentially end up in, a legal situation if I say the wrong thing. I'm not saying don't support World Coffee Research. I'm not saying to support World Coffee Research. What I'm saying is that if you don't question all of these organizations, if you don't question the veil that people are putting up for you to see. Another example, these roasters and cafes that seem to be doing incredible work, and you just can't understand how they're able to sell coffee with such expensive branding and a whole bunch of stuff that just doesn't make sense. If you're taking that at face value without questioning, do they have VC funding? Do they have bottomless pits of money to draw from? Why aren't you able to do it as well as they are? Look behind the veil of what's going on if you can. Find a way to do it and question things before you decide that you want to be like them, before you decide if you trust them, before you decide if they have integrity or not, because you're making decisions based on people's words before you've assessed whether those words and those values and those intentions actually meet the standards that you're holding them to, or whether you're assuming that they do. And I feel that I fell short of that yesterday, and I needed to talk about it with you today, and I needed to kind of debrief with you today about it. I value this so much. I value the fact that this is a portal where we can talk openly and with integrity and with vulnerability through this podcast. I love that you guys send me emails and private messages, but for some reason don't want to talk openly through comments online and on social media about what your perspectives are. But the fact that you value the opportunity to see behind the veils as well, and that this is empowering you to ask questions where you wouldn't previously have felt that you could ask questions in your day-to-day happenings in the coffee world. So I choose, and I need you to know how much I appreciate what we're all creating together. We're creating an opportunity for a very real discussion to happen. And I don't know that that's happened before in coffee, and we're all creating it together. So thank you. Peace, love, and peanut butter, friends. Have an amazing rest of your day.